Ah, it's so hard to explain. I wish I had the words. Should have sent a poet. Hello, Dylan from Throttle Company here in Columbus, Ohio. We do vintage motorcycles. We also do brand new Royal Enfields. That's my own personal Royal Enfield. Here's a little teaser. I'm going to get the 360 cam out later. Maybe try some crazy shots if you've never seen any of that. It's pretty cool stuff. But today we're doing an episode of In the Loop, which is a series that I do regularly where we take a motorcycle, always different, always something new and unusual. And I say new, but I mean new to the shop because obviously it's a lot of vintage motorcycles. But right now we're doing a 2021 Moto Guzzi V7 Stone. It's nice weather today, so a lot of motorcycles out. Anyway, this is an interesting thing happened with Moto Guzzi last year. They it's an emissions thing, but it's actually a positive thing for anyone that's interested in the well, really all of them. But they consolidated everything down to using one engine. So it's the 850. Before this, previous to this, the V7 was a 750. But this year, 2021 and forward, is an 850. So it's using essentially the same basic engine from the V85, which is their adventure bike, which is an 850. A lot of cool, interesting stuff going on this bike. It's got Brembo brakes and it's a shaft drive. It's very obvious. The most obvious thing is this sideways V-twin. So it's a 90-degree. If you're not familiar with the Moto Guzzis, they all have the same engine now, but this is kind of their famous engine. But this sideways V-twin. So it is a V-twin. The pistons go like that. We've got our gearbox. So the engine kind of stops here. Gearbox here. They don't like you to call it a transmission because sometimes in different countries or whatever, they call it a transmission, is the one that transmits the motion in a different direction, which is kind of what happens here. So this is the beginning of the drive shaft, which is part of the swing arm, and then it's the drive shaft. So there's no chain to do maintenance on. It's very easy maintenance. That's one of the major benefits of a drive shaft. Kind of fun because this is definitely the street kind of classic looking cafe racer bike, but they also have the adventure bike. It's kind of interesting to think about an adventure bike where you never need to worry about the chain getting dusty and dirty and needing maintenance. So a lot of interesting things happening with Moto Guzzi. So this basic motorcycle V7 came out in the late 60s, but it was kind of a cruiser. And then the very early 70s, they came out with the V7 Sport, which is basically what we're now doing. They brought it back not too long ago, but this is essentially the V7 Sport, even though they just call them all the V7s now. Comes in a couple different versions. There's a neighborhood UPS guy. A couple different versions. This is the Stone. It has cast wheels and everything's black. And then the Special, which is more the classic looking one. Maybe I'll put it up on the screen. So the original one, which is sort of the V7 Sport, the original V7 Sport, and then the difference between the Stone and the Classic. I'll put a Classic up here. You obviously have the Stone. The first thing you notice, let's take it around the loop here and I'll show you. The first thing that you notice when you turn it on, I'm not sure this will come across on video, but I'll just try to explain it to you. It shakes like this because the pistons are here. We get this weird side to side. I'm not doing that. So when I'm giving it gas here, you see the whole bike shifts to the side. Very interesting. Oh, didn't actually have any neutral there. But it's unique. The drive shaft kind of makes it unique. Obviously, there are other motorcycles that have drive shaft. BMW motorcycles have been having drive shafts for a long time. There's some Hondas that have them. There's, every manufacturer kind of has at least dabbled in it. Not every manufacturer. There's a lot of bikes out, a lot of hooligans that you can see. So maybe we'll get some hooligans on our ride with us. But anyway, it's got a 6-speed transmission, shift like you normally would. All that stuff is standardized at this point, but it's honestly, I mentioned BMW, it's very similar to a BMW. They're Italian, Moto Guzzi is, but there's some kind of German stuff happening, you know, in their design process. It's very interesting to see different approaches to the same concept. You know, we're gonna make a motorcycle, and it has two wheels, and then from there, maybe what if the engine was sideways? What if it had a separate transmission? Which some people do, obviously, but these have a dry clutch. Works just like a normal clutch that you're familiar with, but whether you know this or not, most motorcycles, pretty much every motorcycle other than BMW, some Ducatis and stuff like that, but 90% of the motorcycles out there have a wet clutch, so it's actually the clutch plates themselves are in oil. Moto Guzzi doesn't do that, so they have, between the engine and the transmission, there is a single plate dry clutch. If you've ever worked on your clutch on your manual transmission car, it's the same idea. It's that kind of pressure plate design. Very interesting design. And Moto Guzzi, where this bike specifically fits, is, I would call, modern classics. So like the other bikes that we sell, which is the Royal Enfields, the Triumph, like Bonneville, kind of their modern classic range, like a Kawasaki KZ, or what do they call them now? A Z900 RS. Like anything that's like a cafe racer. You know, Kawasaki also has that W800, and it would fit in that same category. All those bikes live in the same place, and part of the reason why I think this is squarely in that category of the modern retro bikes is because it's still water cooled. So, or I mean, it's not water cooled. It's oil cooled. So it doesn't even have a cooler or radiator or anything like that. Just as the wind comes across the engine as you're driving, that's the only way it's staying cool. And for that reason, that's actually part of why they had problems meeting all the emission standards. Most manufacturers are finding it very difficult to meet modern emission standards without going to water cooling. And so, for that reason, this is retro. Modern Moto Guzzi has not done a lot of new technology, a lot of new designs. I think the reason people like them is because they look like the old ones. And at this point, I'm sure I've showed you a picture or two, and they do look like bikes from the 70s. It's very cool. It's a cool design. That's what I'm into. It's bikes from the 70s, 60s, 70s, pretty much. That's our entire business. So this is right in that category of a modern bike, fuel injection, and this one actually has ride modes, traction control. There's all kinds of technology hidden here, other than the engine design itself is still the oil-cooled, air-cooled engine. So something that these Moto Guzzis are hard to describe. Honestly, we had this bike for a little bit, and I have put off doing a video on it because I didn't know what to say. First of all, what I can say for sure is I love this motorcycle. It is amazing. It's very good. It's very fun and rewarding to drive. But I can't explain why. That's the weirdest thing about this motorcycle, is it's so hard to put into words. What is cool about it? You know, you have the drive shaft, so pardon the wind noise. Maybe it's very windy today. We got a 70-degree day here in the end of March, and I'm out trying to ride as many motorcycles as I can, but the weather, the temperature change is bringing a ton of wind. So hopefully that makes you able to hear me, but we won't know. I won't know until I go to film this, so maybe I'll do some subtitles there. I'm a subtitle guy anyway. So anyway, what makes this bike so interesting is so like I said earlier, the V-twin, when you really get on it, it shifts the bike to the side, so you've got kind of this side to side motion of the engine wants to go side to side. The balance is just fascinating on this motorcycle, where the pistons are out, but so are your knees, right? So you're sort of expecting weight to be there, and for that reason it feels very natural. And the shaft drive, you know, I don't think when I'm driving a chain drive motorcycle, normal regular old motorcycle, I'm not sitting there thinking, well, there's a delay when I'm giving throttle and when it's taking off and going forward. And I definitely don't think there's a delay, but there is something more immediate on a shaft drive. I don't know if you could see, you probably couldn't, it's hard to see on video, and the GoPro does such a good job of stabilizing. But there's something about when I give it gas, it has this kind of torque to the side. It goes from here and stands upright, and then it's so hard to explain, and I wish I could, and I hope some of it comes across on video. Right there when I did a lot of engine braking, the shaft kind of stands the bike upright, and you could just feel connected with the road. It's so hard to explain. I wish I had the words. Should have sent a poet, but it's just, I guess what the easiest thing I could say is you got to experience it for yourself. There aren't a lot of Moto Guzzi dealers out there, but I would certainly let you test ride this one if you're in Columbus or anywhere near us. But it's just something you have to experience. I had my first experience with Moto Guzzi was a guy had bought a Royal Enfield, and we had done a test ride with him the day before on a Royal Enfield, and then when he bought it, he brought his Moto Guzzi for me to try, and it was cool. Let's give it the beans here. Very dusty. So we're in 4th gear. We got a gear indicator. I haven't even talked about the dash. 5th gear now. 4,000 RPMs at 65. 6th gear, which is an overdrive gear, and we're just at 3,000. So highway speeds, I mean, it's an 850. Highway speed, 6 gears, no issue whatsoever. You've got plenty of power. Well, anyway, ever since that first time that I rode a Moto Guzzi, I was intrigued. I thought this is a really, it's an entirely different approach than you're used to. If you're very familiar, if you're a BMW, an old airhead, especially BMW guy, then they're not that unique. But compared to Hondas, Triumphs, Royal Enfields, the bikes that I'm most familiar with, this is just a complete departure, and a very cool one. It's just an awesome, the looks I think are great. I think that it's kind of an acquired taste. This is my best way of describing it. That's some of the words that I've kind of been learning to use. You know, I think this is interesting. In college, I have a degree in business, and we would give a lot of presentations, and we talk about the elevator pitch and how do you describe your business to people and stuff. And it was just about trying to do it more and more, and the more you described it, the more concise you could say, oh, I'm a painter, we do painting or whatever. But in the beginning, you're like, you know, if you need your house painted and you got to call this guy, you're like, yeah, painter, we know what that is. So the more you explain something, the more brief you get, and I feel like the most concise way of saying it I've got at this point, why Moto Guzzis are cool, is they are an acquired taste. So you've been riding motorcycles for a while, you find ones you like, you find ones you don't like, maybe you're into the modern classic retro bikes, and you're just thinking, I'm interested in Moto Guzzi. I've heard of them, but I don't have any experience with it. So that is exactly the kind of person, that's me, that was me before I had ridden one. So that's exactly the kind of person who's going to fall in love with these things. I don't think, I was going to say this, I don't think it's true, but I don't think they're polarizing. Maybe the looks of them are polarizing. I know in the very beginning, because they don't look a lot like other motorcycles with those cylinders the way they are, their kind of signature V-twin look, then I think some people are turned off right away. Newer riders especially, people who just have no familiarity with the brand, or BMWs, maybe the weird engine layout, and I think they might think, oh, that's just weird looking. And kind of the bulge here in the tank is a little unusual. This is almost a 6-gallon tank. Isn't that crazy? They just hold a ton of fuel. And I think it's a very elegant line. I think it's a very cool looking and very classic looking tank. This is my guy from before. Well, anyway, the looks I think are great. I do feel like it could be an acquired taste, but to me, it looks very athletic. With these cylinders up there, they kind of look like muscles. And, you know, like it's got broad shoulders, or like these are its biceps or something. There's something very athletic and muscular about the tank bulging right here, and you're just thinking like it looks, I don't know, it looks like a strong animal, you know what I mean? Something like that. That's the design of it. It looks stout and sturdy. And historically, Moto Guzzi has always focused on reliability. Now that's an interesting thing, because Italians, let's just say, are not known for that. That's my nicest way of saying that. If you're familiar with the most famous Italian, you know, engine-related brands are Ferrari and Lamborghini. There's Ducati. All of those brands, those three brands that I just said, are known for just all-out performance, sexiness for sure. Like there's something as sexy about the Italian machine, and the racing heritage, and the speed for speed's sake. You know what I mean? They have the fastest bikes, or at least they're trying to be. Ducati is certainly trying to be considered in the conversations about what are the fastest motorcycles. We're racing, and we're looking fast and feeling fast and driving fast. So I thought that about Moto Guzzi. That was my original impression, is, oh man, these things must be a real pain to work on, and they must just be like the Ferraris and Lamborghinis. They're just pushing everything to the mechanical limits, and things are failing often. But Moto Guzzi has always put an emphasis on reliability. Same as BMW. In that sense, they're much more like BMW. They were early to get rid of the kickstart. So that's an interesting note about Moto Guzzi. They thought the engine is very, or the whole layout is very car-like. They're thinking, a car doesn't have a kickstart. A car has no secondary way of starting. So it has a rather large battery, and then it has like a car, an automotive starter that uses the flywheel to just turn the whole thing on. And that's kind of an interesting design, but it's built for reliability. Rather than give you a backup, they just want the initial system to work well. Early on, they were one of the first manufacturers of motorcycles. People didn't see motorcycles as potentially being this reliable, or as reliable as cars were at the time. And so they set the goal of being the first motorcycle that could go 100,000 kilometers. Again, they're Italian. Before it needed a major service. So a lot of, especially, you're thinking about the 60s and 70s. You know, in the Triumph manual, it says you have to do a complete top-end restore at 10,000 miles. That was just how motorcycle manufacturers expected you to work on bikes. You're going to completely rebuild this engine before 50,000 miles. And Moto Guzzi early on said, that's not enough reliability. We need to be able to go further before doing those major services. So, you know, the valves are right here. It's actually just two valves, one in and one out, both sides. Super easy to get to. You don't have to take the tank off. The oil, it actually is very interesting. The oil system is pretty interesting on these bikes. It's a dual tricoidal oil pump. So it's these, they basically squeeze the oil one bit at a time, and it's two shafts on two different pumps. And it's a pretty interesting method, but it winds up being a lot less oil. So this big 850cc uses less than 2 liters of oil. Isn't that crazy? It's about 1.75 liters, and that's just nuts. Then there's separate transmission oil, and then your drive shaft, and those are the only maintenance items you ever care about. That's it. You know, make sure you got air in your tires, just like anything else. But the major points of maintenance are meant to be extremely reliable, extremely large service intervals. And that's something, again, about the design philosophy, or the overall company philosophy of Moto Guzzi, is that it's quirky, but it's built to not need so much from the owner. Anyway, I could go on, and I surely will. thank you very much. I got other bikes to ride. Hopefully you can watch some more videos of mine. I do this very often in the loop, try to give you an idea of what it's like to ride this motorcycle. And this is the most unique one that I've done so far with these cylinders out here. By the way, sometimes people ask if your knee gets in the way. My knee does not get in the way at all. I think that it looks like that from the outside, but when you're actually on it, they disappear. You don't even think about it. All right, well, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time with In the Loop.